In my decades of analyzing the human psyche, sitting across from hundreds of troubled souls at my clinic in Zurich, I observed a phenomenon so persistent and quietly destructive that it became one of the central pillars of my life's work. When an individual begins the arduous, painful, and sacred process of individuation, when they step out of the collective sleepwalk and begin to integrate their shadow, refine their character, and claim their true authority, the world around them does not always applaud. In fact, more often than not, a silent subterranean resistance begins to brew within their closest circles. Friends, family members, and longtime colleagues who once claimed to love them suddenly begin to project a strange, icy hostility. They drop subtle, stinging remarks. They minimize your breakthroughs. They act as though your healing is a personal insult to their existence. For a long time, early in my medical career, I wondered why human beings react with such hidden malice toward the genuine psychological growth of another. The modern world tells you that people hate your progress out of simple jealousy or insecurity. But as a psychiatrist who has descended into the deepest, darkest caverns of the human unconscious, I can tell you that this surface-level explanation is completely inadequate. What modern culture mislabels as ordinary envy, I recognized in my clinical practice as a profound, terrifying threat to the ego architecture of those around you. When you begin to evolve, you cease to play your assigned role in their psychic landscape. You break the unconscious contract that kept their own repressions safely hidden. You become a living, breathing mirror, a light so bright that it illuminates the unexamined dust, the unhealed wounds, and the buried failure in their own souls. They do not hate you because you are changing. They hate you because your evolution violently forces them to confront their own self-chosen stagnation. If you have recently stepped onto the path of self-realization and suddenly found yourself surrounded by coldness, betrayal, or unspoken resentment from people you trusted, I ask you to stay with me. In this journey today, we will pull back the veil on the hidden mechanisms of the human mind. We will explore why your transformation triggers such deep instinctual fear in others, how to recognize the subtle warning signs before their hostility destroys your peace, and how you can protect your newly awakened consciousness without retreating into bitterness or arrogance. Understanding this truth will not only liberate you from the burden of trying to appease those who wish to keep you small, but it will force you to confront the hidden dynamics of your own shadow. Let me share with you a remarkably illuminating case from my clinical records at Burgholzli and my private practice in Küsnacht. A man named Richard, a highly successful architect in his early 90s, came to see me suffering from chronic exhaustion, severe anxiety, and a sudden, inexplicable rupture in his long-standing friendships. For most of his life, Richard had played the role of the agreeable, self-sacrificing caretaker. He was the man everyone called when they needed money, emotional rescue, or a sympathetic ear. His entire personality was built around a thick, carefully constructed persona of absolute compliance and selflessness. But beneath this benevolent mask, Richard's unconscious was screaming. He had repressed his own ambition, his healthy aggression, and his authentic desires for decades, always placing the needs of his circle above his own. Through our intensive analytical sessions, Richard began to do the necessary internal work. He began to integrate his shadow. He learned to say a firm, unapologetic no. He stopped rescuing people who refused to take responsibility for their own lives, and he redirected his vast creative energy into his own architectural firm. By all objective measures, Richard was experiencing a magnificent rebirth. He was becoming whole, integrated, and genuinely powerful. Yet, when he came into my office a few months into this transformation, he was deeply shaken. He told me that his closest friend of 15 years, a man with whom he had shared countless hours, had suddenly turned on him. When Richard proudly shared the news of a major award his firm had received, his friend did not celebrate. Instead, his friend looked at him with a cold, piercing gaze and said, "You've changed, Richard. You're becoming arrogant and selfish. You used to be grounded." In the weeks that followed, this friend began spreading subtle, insidious rumors about Richard within their social group, portraying Richard's newly claimed healthy boundaries as a moral failing. Richard was devastated and confused. He asked me, "Dr. Jung, why are the people I loved most trying to tear me down now that I am finally happy?" I looked at Richard and explained the bitter truth of the psyche. His friend had never loved the authentic Richard. His friend had loved Richard's utility. Richard had served as a convenient psychological sponge, absorbing everyone else's weakness so they never had to grow. The moment Richard dropped his agreeable mask and withdrew his energy, he disrupted the delicate psychological balance of the entire group. His friend's sudden hostility was not a reflection of Richard's arrogance. It was the friend's ego desperately defending itself against the terrifying realization that he was remaining stagnant while Richard was moving forward. When you observe micro-expressions in these moments, the slight tightening of the jaw when you announce a victory, the fleeting flash of contempt in their eyes before they force a polite smile, the immediate shift in conversation to lower your energy, you are witnessing the unconscious mind under extreme distress. The ego is scrambling to protect its illusions. If you have ever felt that sickening realization that someone close to you is quietly rooting for your failure, I want you to anchor this truth in your consciousness right now. Take a moment, go down to the comments section below and write this exact phrase to claim your psychological clarity. I will no longer shrink to keep others comfortable. To truly understand why your personal growth triggers such violent subterranean resistance in others, we must analyze what happens during moments of pressure, betrayal, and mask breakdown. When you live in an unintegrated state, running from your shadow and hiding behind a socially acceptable persona, you establish relationships with people who are doing the exact same thing. Unconscious individuals form implicit, unspoken alliances built on mutual compensation. You agree to ignore their unhealed wounds, and in return they agree to validate your defense mechanisms. It is a comfortable, stagnant equilibrium. However, when you begin the process of self-analysis and individuation, you unilaterally break this contract. This creates a moment of intense psychic friction, what I call a persona breakdown. Suddenly, your presence acts as an uninvited light shining into their dark storage rooms. When a person who is deeply attached to their victimhood or their comfortable mediocrity sees you rising, stepping into your power, and taking radical responsibility for your life, their mind undergoes a severe cognitive dissonance. They are faced with two choices. Option 1 is to look inward, take accountability for their own life, face their own shadow, and undertake the painful work of transformation. Option 2 is far easier and much less painful for the ego. Discredit you, attack your motives, label your growth as a defect, and convince themselves that you have simply lost your way. 9 times out of 10, an unconscious individual will choose option 2. They will manifest what I term selective empathy. When you were struggling, depressed, broke, or anxious, they were full of warmth and advice. They were empathetic because your misery validated their sense of superiority. It made them feel safe, competent, and needed. But the moment you surpass them or step out of the pit, their empathy vanishes, replaced by a cold, calculative hostility. They can tolerate you doing well, but never better than them. An integrated, self-aware individual behaves in the absolute opposite manner. When an integrated person sees someone close to them grow, succeed, and transcend their limitations, they feel a deep sense of inspiration and joy. They recognize that another human being's elevation is proof that transformation is possible for everyone. They do not view your light as something that darkens their world. They view it as a beacon that lights the way. If you have experienced this painful shift, where people who held your hand while you were down suddenly let go when you stood up, you are experiencing the inevitable tax of psychological evolution. To mark this realization and solidify your boundary against this subtle hostility, leave this second reflection in the comments. My growth is a gift, not an apology. Now, let us descend into the fundamental architecture of the psyche to dissect the exact mechanics of why this phenomenon occurs. We must look closely at the interplay between the persona, the ego, and the shadow. The persona is the public mask we wear to navigate society, the agreeable employee, the devoted friend, the humble servant. Beneath the persona lies the shadow, the vast, hidden reservoir of our unacknowledged instincts, repressed desires, disowned power, envy, and potential. When a person refuses to do the hard work of shadow work, those repressed elements do not simply disappear. They sit in the dark, fermenting into affect-toned complexes, highly charged, emotional landmines buried in the unconscious. When you begin to grow, when you claim your power and integrate your own shadow, you activate their projection mapping. Projection is one of the most fundamental defense mechanisms in analytical psychology. It occurs when the ego, unable to tolerate an unpleasant truth about itself, ejects that truth outward and attaches it to another person. When someone secretly hates your personal growth, they are projecting their own disowned potential and buried self-loathing onto you. They cannot face the reality that they are choosing safety over growth, so they convince themselves that you are becoming fake, selfish, or dangerous. To make this architecture crystal clear, we must break down this psychological resistance into 3 distinct classifications that you will encounter on your path to individuation. The first classification is the shadow trap of sabotage. In this stage, the individual in your life uses passive-aggressive tactics to undermine your momentum. They will give you backhanded compliments, express concern wrapped in doubt, or offer unsolicited advice designed to plant seeds of hesitation in your mind. They might say, "Are you sure you want to take that risk? You're changing so much, I barely recognize you anymore." This is not genuine concern. It is a subconscious attempt to pull you back down into the collective crab bucket so they do not feel left behind. The second classification is the persona breakdown of slander. When passive-aggressive sabotage fails and you continue to evolve, the resistant individual shifts to overt or covert character assassination. Because they can no longer control you, they try to control how others see you. They will misinterpret your boundaries as hostility, your self-confidence as narcissism, and your clarity as coldness. They build a false narrative to justify their distance, convincing the social circle that you have betrayed the collective. They require a consensus of disapproval to protect their fragile ego from recognizing its own failure to evolve. The third classification is the transcendent fracture. This is the final inevitable stage where the relationship simply can no longer exist on its old frequency. The energetic and psychological gap between your differentiated consciousness and their unexamined life becomes vast. You find that you no longer have anything meaningful to discuss. The small talk feels suffocating, their complaints feel draining, and their attempts to drag you back into old dynamics feel unbearable. This is the moment where the universe forces a separation, demanding that you let go of the past to inhabit your future. As I wrote throughout my career, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. When you understand these 3 stages, you cease to view the hostility of others as a personal tragedy. You begin to see it for what it truly is, a predictable, mechanical reaction of an unexamined mind confronted with the light of awareness. How then do you apply this deep psychological archaeology to your daily life? How do you navigate romantic relationships, workplace dynamics, and your own private self-reflection when faced with the cold reality of human envy? You must implement the integration test, a practical, unwavering method of observation and boundary setting. In romantic relationships, you must observe how your partner reacts when you express a desire to upgrade your life, whether that is improving your physical health, pursuing higher creative ambitions, or engaging in deep inner work. A healthy partner, grounded in their own identity, will meet your evolution with curiosity and support, even if it feels intimidating at first. But a partner whose ego is dependent on your insecurity will subtly attempt to dismantle your progress. They may mock your new habits, tempt you to return to old addictions, or guilt you for spending time on self-improvement. If you notice this pattern, you must realize that you cannot heal a partner who is determined to stay asleep. You must establish firm, non-negotiable boundaries. Love does not mean sacrificing your soul's evolution to keep someone else comfortable in their stagnation. In the workplace and social systems, the rule of strategic awareness is paramount. When you begin to rise, perform with high excellence, or demonstrate superior psychological clarity, you must be prepared for the political envy of the collective. Do not parade your breakthroughs in front of people who are nursing deep feelings of inadequacy. Practice what I called the containment of energy. Keep your greatest ambitions, your deep insights, and your spiritual victories private, sharing them only with those rare individuals who have proven themselves to be genuine allies on the path of individuation. Learn to smile, remain polite, and maintain a calm, impenetrable exterior while keeping your inner world completely guarded. Never offer your deepest treasures to those who only wish to find flaws in them. In your private self-reflection, your journaling and inner work, you must use this exterior hostility as a master mirror for your own shadow. Ask yourself with brutal honesty, am I reacting to their envy with self-righteousness? Am I secretly enjoying feeling superior to those who are lagging behind? If you find even a trace of spiritual pride within yourself, you have fallen into a trap. The goal of individuation is not to become superior to others. It is to become whole within yourself. When you hold a mirror to your own reactions, you ensure that the bitterness of others does not contaminate the purity of your own transformation. Now I must issue a stern, uncompromising warning. As you gain these powerful psychological insights and learn to read the hidden dynamics of the human mind, there is a grave danger that threatens your own soul. You must never use this knowledge to become a shadow hunter, a cynical, arrogant spectator who goes around diagnosing everyone else's flaws, projecting narcissism onto every critic, and looking down on those who are struggling in the dark. The moment you use psychological analysis as a weapon to belittle others or to excuse your own lack of compassion, you have surrendered to the dark side of your own shadow. You become the very monster you were trying to understand. Remember the mirror effect. Everything you observe in this world, the envy, the beauty, the hatred, the nobility, is a potential reflection of what lies dormant within your own unconscious. When you see someone reacting with bitter envy toward your growth, let it serve not as a reason to condemn them, but as a solemn reminder of how terrifying it is for a human soul to feel trapped in its own unfulfilled potential. Feel a quiet, detached compassion for them, but do not let them derail your journey. Your sole obligation in this fleeting life is to fulfill your own higher calling, to bring your unconscious into the light, and to walk the lonely, glorious path of individuation to its absolute fulfillment. Do not look back, do not shrink, and do not apologize for the light you carry. Stand firm in your truth, hold your boundaries with unwavering strength, and continue to ascend.